Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I am going to be discussing last night's game between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Dallas Mavericks. However, before I get too far into it, I would like to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all of the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. And without further ado, let's talk about the game. And the first guy that I want to touch on is this guy right here, Khris Middleton. Now, Middleton didn't have his best game. He was 6 for 18 with just a few minutes remaining in the fourth quarter, and the announcers were talking about how he was having one of his more inefficient nights over the past few years. But he made up for it by knocking down two of the biggest shots of this young season so far for the Bucks. Both of them were off the dribble, contested threes with the shot clock winding down, and both of them were shots that he absolutely needed to make in order for the Bucks to maintain momentum and go on to win this game. He really showcased what his skill is as a late game scorer who can create shots for himself off of the dribble. He's so fluid with that pull-up three-point shot, and that's really valuable when you're in situations where opposing teams are really giving it all to shut down the primary option of your team's offense, which in a lot of cases is Giannis, but towards the end of the game, it ends up being Khris Middleton because of Giannis's struggles at the free throw line. Much more on that a bit later. But with Khris, he's actually been a bright spot in the playoffs for the Bucks these past two seasons. Essentially, every other player on this roster has struggled, but Khris has actually put up some pretty good performances in those playoff games. The ones that would come to mind are a few games against the Celtics. I guess that would have been 3 seasons ago when we were eliminated by them. And then last season in Game 4 against the Heat, where he piled up, I think he was pretty close to 40 points and was responsible for the only Bucks win of that series. But he's been able to carry over his consistent production as a scorer from the regular season into the playoffs. And the Bucks need that from him considering Giannis's struggles, like I said before. And tonight he showcased that he's fully capable of being that high-level late game scorer that the Bucks need him to be. And I just really enjoy watching Khris Middleton play. And if you are sleeping on this guy and you think that he's not deserving of being an all-star caliber player, well then you got to watch the Bucks a bit more because he's really a special player. He is super enjoyable to watch because of the fluidity and rhythm with which he plays the game. And yeah, you're missing out. So go check out some Khris Middleton highlights and tune in to the next Bucks game. I don't know if they play one before this, but on Monday they play the Nets, Martin Luther King Day, nationally televised. It's going to be a fun game. Definitely check it out. Also might be James Harden's Nets debut. Moving on, Giannis had a pretty solid game tonight for the Bucks when you take out two aspects. He had 31 points and 9 rebounds, shot 14 for 21 from the field, and 2 for 5 from the three-point line. And at first glance, that seems like an outstanding game for Giannis. Knocked down a couple threes, shot 66% from the field, played really good defense and was really limiting what Kristaps Porzingis was able to do on the other side of the floor, which was very valuable as Porzingis really struggled. I think he finished shooting just 6 for 19, and some of that can be attributed to this being just his second game back following the injury he suffered in last season's playoffs. But I also think that Giannis did a terrific job of contesting all of his shots, not letting him get good looks, and just really sticking with him through those pick and pop coverages that the Mavericks are so prone to doing because of Porzingis' great ability to space the floor as a big guy. But where Giannis' game probably ended up being a negative instead of a positive was he shot 1 for 10 from the free throw line and turned the ball over 5 times in the first half. He also picked up his 4th foul very early in the third quarter, with an absolutely silly reach in against Luka Doncic. It was a clear call, and it was just a boneheaded play by a guy who the Bucks need on the court for more minutes than he was able to get tonight because of the foul trouble. So that can't happen. But what also can't happen is this free throw shooting. Now with Giannis, it's mental at this point. He's gotten to the point where he's like a 30% three-point shooter, and if you're shooting that from three, then you at least should be able to shoot 70% from the free throw line. And there are plenty of guys that can't even shoot the three nearly at that level. There's guys that don't take three-pointers that are able to be 80%, 75% free throw shooters. And Giannis was that at one point in his career very early on. But as his offensive workload has increased, his free throw rate, or not his free throw rate, because that has gone up, but at the same time, his free throw efficiency has gone down. And it's all in his head. He just needs to keep working on it, keep practicing. It's muscle memory, and Giannis is one of the hardest working people out there. We saw footage of him right back on the court tonight, shooting more free throws following the conclusion of the game. And as a Bucks fan, you just have to cross your fingers and hope that he can figure out how to shoot free throws, because 1 for 10, yikes. And then with the turnovers, that's been a bit of a continuous problem with Giannis so far this season, as he's one of the more charge-prone players in the NBA. And occasionally being a 7-foot player who handles the ball as much as he does can be a bit difficult, especially when you have smaller defenders on you who are able to poke the ball away. And he sometimes can have a bit of a loose handle because of that. But overall, I would say that the free throw shooting is the most concerning of these problems with Giannis, and I really, really hope that he can figure it out. Outside of those two all-stars for the Bucks, there were not too many huge performances from the role players. Bobby Portis had a pretty solid game, providing a lot of energy off the bench and finishing with 8 points and 13 rebounds. I don't think he played 20 minutes, so grabbing 13 rebounds in that limited time is really, really impressive, but that stat just demonstrates the energy with which Bobby plays. And having that spark off the bench as someone who's going to be crashing the glass and attacking the rim when he has the ball in his hands and running the floor, finishing in transition, getting back on defense in transition is valuable. Now, if he's able to bring the same consistency and continue to play hard even when he's struggling a little bit when they're playing good teams in the playoffs, that would make him all that much more valuable to this Bucks team. And I'm very hopeful that he can, because he seems like a very fun player. He is a very fun player, and I love seeing someone who works as hard as he does on the court succeed. But it just comes down to whether or not this is going to be able to translate to the playoffs. And if he's able to get that three-point shot up and continue to shoot it at a high level, that just makes him all that more viable as a playoff rotation option who can space the floor. Jrue Holiday would be the other guy here who had a solid game. Offensively, he put up pretty okay stats, scoring 16 points on 7 for 15 shooting, but it was more on the defensive end of the floor where he stood out tonight. He was clearly the best option for the Bucks on Luka Doncic, and quite interestingly, they were actually a bit switch heavy today. Oh, I wouldn't say switch heavy. It's the Bucks. They'll never be switch heavy when they're under Mike Budenholzer. But they were switching a little bit on ball screens. You saw if it was a screen coming from Dante DiVincenzo's man, then he would switch off onto Luka. And that's not really something you see all that much in Bud's scheme. Usually it would be Jrue would have to fight through the screen and recover onto his guy. But the fact that he's making that adjustment, and by he I mean Coach Bud, of course, is promising, and I'm hopeful that we see that continue and he continues to try out different pick and roll coverages, because there were more than one that he tried out tonight, which is a good sign for certain. But in general, I thought that Jrue did a great job on Luka. He really limited what he was able to do in terms of getting quality shots off. Luka did finish with 28 points, but a lot of those came down the stretch in the fourth quarter, and throughout the game as a whole, Jrue really limited how effective he was able to be. So I give a lot of props to him for that. As always, he has a terrific handle, does a great job of cutting to the rim when the offense needs a little bit to juice it up, and he's great in transition. He is able to knock down a step back three or something like that when necessary, and he's just a very, very high level role play. It's hard to call him a role player, but that's kind of the mold that he has been forced to play in with the Bucks. And I think he could have an expanded role, and I'm sure that as he gets more accustomed to playing with Giannis and Chris, that will come. But for now, he is playing like a role player, taking on difficult matchups defensively, spacing the floor, and running the offense with the second unit. And I'm not using that role player term in a derogatory form. It's a compliment because he's playing that role at an incredibly high level, but he's not been asked to perform like an all-star so far this season. Will that change? We'll see. But for now, he's really helping this team out by doing the little things at a high level, and I think that he's really going to help them in the playoffs, especially where having a guard who can take on those difficult matchups night in and night out during a 7-game series, while also being able to provide plus playmaking and shooting on the offensive end is so, so valuable, and the Bucks just haven't had that. So I'm happy to have Drew, and I'm excited to see what he can do in the rest of this season. Brook Lopez had a double-double. Pretty standard Brook Lopez stuff. Knocked down some threes, took advantage of mismatches in the post. Only shot 4 for 12 from the field, but I don't know, not too much to say here about him. That's about it, all that I wanted to talk about. On the Mavericks side of things, they were missing quite a few players, but I still think that this is a nice win for the Bucks, considering the fact that Giannis was just 1 for 10 from the free throw line and also had the foul trouble, so he was forced to miss large portions of the action. But yeah, leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts were. That's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.